What's up guys, Asian here again with another build guide video. This time we're going over a Magicka DK TPS. As with all of the rest of our guide videos, we'll be going over stats, ability bars, gear, and CP point distribution. Again, all this gear is considered best in slot, so do keep that in mind when you do your own parses. Your own parses might be lower because just because of the gear that I have compared to the gear that you have access to. So this is a Silks of the Sun, and I'll explain why I'm using Silks of the Sun after we quickly go over the gear. Grothar, one medium, one heavy. For the passive, Undaunted passive, I don't actually have the Undaunted passive unlocked right now, so I'm not getting the stat boost right now. My stats will be about 6% higher if I'm going 5-1-1 like I am here. I might switch to 6 light and 1 heavy, in which case I'm only going to get a 4% boost, but I will gain some sustain with the extra light armor piece. Silks of the Sun here, most of it is in Divines. I have 1 infused heavy piece. You can use infused on your chest or legs if you want, instead of Divines. DPS difference is going to be marginal here. IA gold jewelry. You can use Blue Moon Dancer if you have access to Blue Moon Dancer instead, just because gold jewelry can only be gotten from vet trials. Got a random sharpened Inferno staff. This is not best in slot. The best in slot would be something like a sharpened Inferno VMA staff or a sharpened Master's Inferno staff. Back bar is going to be sharpened Maelstrom Inferno staff. This is best in slot, and this is a fairly uncommon drop from VMA. So the reason why we're going to be using Sun is because of that second item effect. Adds 1064 maximum health, helps increase our survivability, and allows us to use Witchmother's Potent Brew instead of buy stat food. Witchmother's Potent Brew gives us a little bit more regen, gives us 319 regen. We are losing out on about 2000 Magicka and 1500 health, and that's where Silks of the Sun, the health comes in. In addition, I'm also going to be using a health enchant on my Grothar's head. That also helps make up for that lost health. I am going to be losing out on Magicka, but the sustain that you get back from the Witchmothers more than makes up for that loss in Magicka. Remember, you get 1 spell power for every about 10 Magicka you get, so you're losing out on about 200 spell power, more or less, effectively, but you're also gaining that Magicka regen, which is very, very powerful, especially post-Morrowind. For stats, 64 points into Magicka. You can see here I don't quite make the 17k health minimum recommended for endgame content. That's mostly because I don't have the Undaunted passive yet. Once I get it, I'll definitely be hitting that 17k minimum health. So you see, you don't need to put any health points into health in order to hit that minimum health that you need for endgame content. For bars, front bars can be Harness Magicka, that's your shield. Flame Lash, you can use the other morph, which is Molten Whip, but Flame Lash is going to give you a bit higher DPS. It also heals you, so that's always useful as well. And it's basically, when it does proc and you target an off-balance enemy, that basically is a free cast, so you don't need to spend any Magicka when that ability procs. Engulfing Flame for that extra 10%, and Burning Embers for the damage over time. A lot of your damage here as a Magicka DK is going to be damage over time. So Scoria's is also a very good set to use. We won't be getting as high of a DPS using Scoria versus Grothar, but you don't have to put any health enchants on Scoria's if you're using that, because Scoria's 2-piece, 1-piece I should say, adds extra health. So you don't, if you're going to use Scoria's, you don't need to swap out a Magicka enchant for a health enchant. Inner Light and Shooting Star, you can use the Deshra ulti to play it by ear, depends on the fight. Your back bar, Eruption, Flames of Oblivion, Blockade of Fire, Rearming Trap, and Inner Light again. So Inner Light, so Flames of Oblivion also gives you Major Prophecy. They don't stack, it doesn't stack with Inner Light. Inner Light's just here because you get that extra 5% Magicka with it slotted. And then Standard of Might helps to increase your damage. It lasts for 17 seconds, and you get 50% deal 15% extra damage. It's a very powerful ultimate. It's the best ultimate to use as Dragonknight, although it is expensive at 250 ultimate. Champion points for Magicka DK. 75 points into Tenacity, 75 points into Arcanist. It's not worth putting those 25 points to get the 15%. You're putting 25 points into to get that 1%. It's just not worth it. You can put those points elsewhere. 4% to Mooncalf, probably gonna move that. 28 into Warlord to reduce cost of Break Free. Breaking free is very important in endgame content. As a Magicka character, your stamina pool is pretty small to begin with, so you kind of want to take any means necessary to reduce your stamina costs for any abilities. Along that same line, we have points into Tumbling. You can put points into Shadow Ward to reduce cost of block. There are going to be fights in endgame content where you're going to be block casting, essentially blocking while casting your abilities at the same time. So putting points into Shadow Ward will help reduce the stamina cost of block casting. 40 points into Elfborn, 64 into Elemental Expert, 31 points into Master at Arms. That just helps out your Flame Lash. Direct damage is basically anything that deals its damage all in one hit. So something like Engulfing Flames and Burning Embers, since they're dots, they won't be affected by Master at Arms, but Flame Lash will, because it deals all its damage in one blow. Thaumaturge, 75 points for the Exploiter passive. There is some debate whether Exploiter is going to be useful for Dragonknight. I believe it still is. I still think Exploiter is a very, very powerful passive to have as a Magicka Dragonknight DPS, so I'm keeping it for now. For your warrior CPs, make sure to put points into Hardy and Elemental Defender before anything else. There's currently a bug where if you don't do that, you won't get the full damage mitigation. So just put points into these two before anything else. 20 in the Thick Skin to reduce damage over time effects. There aren't as many in endgame content, but where there is, it's pretty damaging, so anything to reduce that's always nice. 31 points into Ironclad. Basically reduces damage for about 90 to 95% of the attacks you'll be getting hit with. 31 points into Bastion, because we are Magicka, so we do have a damage shield. So this helps increase our survivability. So for this parse, I'm going to be using Trash Pots. This is pots that you pick up from while adventuring. You will be using Spell Power Essence of Spell Power instead in a real trial scenario. However, those are expensive, so I'm not going to be using them on a DPS parse. So instead I'm going to be using Trash Pots instead. So do bear that in mind. I will be using, instead of Inner Light on my back bar, I will be using Molten Armaments instead for the Major Sorcery boost. And instead of my shield here, I'm going to be using Elemental Drain instead, since I don't obviously have anything to shield against here. So before we start this parse, a couple of things to point out. It's okay to start a parse with a ultimate that's a completely realistic endgame scenario. You try to go into a boss with your ultimate already up, so don't be afraid to start a DPS parse with your ultimate. That's perfectly reasonable to do. For if you're doing it with a healer or a tank to help you out, they can only give you Elemental Drain and Orb or Shards. Just to keep things realistic, because those are the only two things you're going to really be guaranteed to have during a trial. You're guaranteed to have your Major Breach or Major Fracture, and you're guaranteed to have your orbs, your resource management up. So those are the only two things I would say you absolutely need to have on your DPS parse. Everything else I wouldn't recommend doing because you're inflating your DPS. So for instance, Combat Prayer gives you 8% extra damage, but in a DPS parse where you're always going to have 100% uptime, that's not necessarily going to be the case in a trial scenario. You might only get 80%, 70%, maybe even as low as 60% uptime. So that's not as realistic. So don't use things like Comma Prayer, Power of the Light, Warhorn, Crusher, Enchants. Those won't give you an accurate DPS reading. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start our DPS test. Just going to debuff our skeleton here. Buff ourselves, and 3, 2, 1, go! There we go. That is a standard DPS test for me, 30k. Pretty good parse. We're going to go ahead and look at our comment metrics. I highly recommend downloading it. It gives you a very good detailed parse of what you're doing, and it helps identify places where you can improve. So looking at our buffs here, Flames of Oblivion is about 89% uptime. That's pretty good. Want to shoot for 90 if you can. But 89 is pretty damn close. Minor Force uptime is 84%. Could do a little bit better with this. You kind of want to shoot for 85 and up, 90 and up even. But 84 is pretty decent. You could go with a little bit more uptime. One thing to note, there is some RNG involved in DPS parsing, just a little tiny bit. So Grothar has a theoretical uptime, maximum uptime of 50%. So you see here 45%, so I mean that's pretty close to maximum uptime. So you can kind of look at this and kind of see, okay, my Grothar didn't proc as much because I only got 40% uptime. Looking ahead at where our percentage of our DPS comes from, light attack 18.3%. That's pretty much fantastic. That's probably the highest percentage I've gotten so far in Magicka DK. And that's just due to my light weaving. It's also because of my Maelstrom Inferno staff that deals increased damage, increase some damage with my light attack as long as my Blockade of Fire is up. So you can see here, my light attack weaving is pretty much on point here. Blockade of Fire, the Flame Lash, Flames of Oblivion, all of these are pretty standard percentages, except for the light attack. That's probably the highest I've seen so far. One other thing you kind of want to look for here is your uptime on burning. Got 65% uptime on burning. That's not terrible. That's not too bad. That's kind of also a little bit RNG based as well. So that's it for this build for the Dragonknight. This is Silks of the Sun with Witchmother's Potent Brew. Make sure to practice your rotation, practice your light weaving, and I'll see you guys in the next video.